Hello and welcome back to the Voices of the Vic podcast. And I'm back today to do another episode of our Lowdown series. For those that don't know what that is, whenever we sign a player, we like to get a bit of insight, know the sort of player that we're signing. And the best way to do that is by speaking to opposition podcasts of teams that they've played for. So it was obviously transfer deadline day last night. It closed at 11 p.m. and Watford made two deadline day signings. Daniel Jebberson was formally announced, as was Festy Ebosele. Now, what do we know about our new man from Udinese? Well, I'll just give you a few little snippets of information before we bring in our guest, which is Jason from the Rams Review podcast. Festy is 22 years old. He's made 41 appearances in all competitions for Derby County from the 2020-21 season to then the following season, 21-22. He's made 50 appearances for Udinese in all competitions, and he's also made 3 senior appearances for Ireland's national team, and he made his debut it's actually the anniversary of it in a week or so. The 7th of September 2023, he made his debut in a 2-0 loss against France in a European Championships qualifier. So obviously, as I said, I am joined by Jason from the Rams Review podcast. Jason, thank you very much for joining us. How are things for you? We were just chatting about your end to the deadline day there. Are you quite content with Derby's deadline? Well, deadline day and transfer activity throughout, really.
Hi Mike, how are we doing? Long time no see. Last week, but yes, who'd have seen Watford signing an Udinese player, eh? But yes, obviously one that's come from Derby. I'll move on to Festy in a little bit, but yeah, I mean, a team coming up from League One. We've made 11 new signings. Strangely, I don't think we've really let anybody go. So I was expecting one or two sort of to move on, but that's not really happened. So we've brought in 11. We've been screaming for a number 9, but at the end of the day, everybody in the Championship, everybody at every level is looking for that number 9, aren't they? And yeah, obviously we've not managed to get one over the line. We was linked with a couple, El Hamidi from Ipswich. We were linked with, obviously, a lad who was at AFC Wimbledon a couple of seasons ago. We was linked with him. We've been, in fact, right towards the end, I think we were linked even with one of your strikers.
Rajovic.
Yeah. We was linked with him. There's been a few names fluttered about. Ultimately, doesn't look like we've been able to do the deal. So we'll certainly be, I'm sure, looking at that free agent market in the next sort of week or so to bring in something a little bit up front. But yeah, I mean, we've signed Championship experience, and I think a good thing about one or two of the signings that we've made, we've sometimes when you say the word experience, you're looking at the 30 plus. And it does tend to be a way that Derby goes. But I must admit, the two that we signed yesterday, it's not quite 30 plus experience. So we'll wait and see to see how things progress. I think a lot of Derby fan base were still a little bit worried about the forward line, but I'd be very surprised if Derby don't dip into that free agent market, to be honest. And then we'll just have to wait and see how we go until January.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, I think Watford might even dip into that because we were rumoured to be after a centre midfielder as well, especially with Loser coming off injured the other week the other day, against Plymouth. And I think Kiprianu, the captain from Peterborough, was one of those mentioned for those that are watching and might not know. In terms of Festy, then, obviously I've mentioned he made 41 appearances for you guys a few seasons ago. The first thing I want to sort of debunk, if anything, and get insight on is the position that he plays, because we obviously know him as a right back. But when I was having a look, I always have a look when we sign a player on Transfermarkt, and I have a look at their stats and how they're getting on. Now, albeit it was only a small matter of games, he has played at left back, left mid, right mid, and defensive mid. Were any of those positions he played at Derby? And then secondly, would you say that right back, right wing back is his main position?
Yeah, he was. Festy came through at a time where Derby were struggling financially, and he just got thrown in there. Obviously, the coaching team at the time, I can't even. Do you know what? I can't even remember it was under. Obviously, being a Derby fan, it's been a bit of a whirlwind the last 3 or 4 years. But yeah, they just threw so much mud at the wall to see what kind of stuck, and Festy was one of them. We had a bit of an injury crisis at left back. That was the reason he moved there. He ain't no left back. He certainly ain't a left midfielder either. Predominantly, we saw him play at right back. Certainly right-sided. We've seen him play as a right back. We've seen him play as a right wing back. We've seen him play as a right winger, and I even think we saw him play up front once. Because he has got electric pace. Absolutely. For the size of the guy, obviously I've not seen him for a couple of years, but he was an absolute unit. And he could move. There was no two ways about it. So yeah, predominantly down that right hand side, but certainly a little bit more defensive minded. We pushed him up a little bit because basically we were just lacking creativity at the time, and he does like to get to the bar line and put a cross in. That was probably his weakest point at the time, is just his consistency from crossing. But of course, we're talking about a lad who was only 19, 20 when he was at Derby. So obviously he's been at other places for the last couple of years, and I'm sure he's developed a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. You mentioned there about him sort of being thrown into the deep end. One of the things I was going to ask, and I think your answer's pretty much cleared this up, but it might, something else might come through to fruition. You said there he come through the academy at Derby. Was it a case of, like you say, he was just pushed in because you were struggling financially, or were there murmurs around the club that this kid maybe had something special, and therefore you saw the progression maybe a little bit earlier than you would have expected, or did it just come as a total surprise? Was it literally, oh crap, we haven't really got anyone else, let's stick him in?
It was a little bit of all of those things, Mike, to be perfectly honest with you. He made his debut for Derby in an FA Cup game. I think it was under Rooney. We drew away at Chorley, and during COVID, and the whole first team squad got COVID. So we ended up playing our under 18s, and he was part of that. So he was a name. He's Irish, as you may well know. We brought him over from Bray Wanderers in 2018. And then was obviously in our academy for about 2.5 years before he made his debut. So his official debut was in that FA Cup game. He wouldn't have been involved, obviously, if that wasn't the case. But he was sort of a name that, yeah, there was a few murmurings about him, but he was, raw. He was this, he was that. And I say all that, not 4 months later does he make his debut for Derby at a game against Norwich. Yeah. But that was a substitute. And then it was sort of from then on, as I say, just because of where Derby were at the time, financially struggling a little bit, we just needed a bit of something. And he had that raw pace and power, and he was willing to drive. And it was quite a creative outlet for Derby, something that at the time we'd not really got a great deal of.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think a lot of Watford fans, their understanding of him is, as you've already pointed out, he's young, he's quick, he's powerful, but he had a lot to learn. So the two questions coming out of that really is, how is he defensively? Because right wing back, we are very blessed. So it's Ryan Andrews, our normal right wing back, who played against you guys the other week. And going forwards, he's brilliant. He's also got pace. Maybe not as much as it sounds Festy's got. And then Ngakia, when he's not injured, which unfortunately for him is a hell of a lot of the time, he also, possesses a decent bit of pace, but he's very good going forward. But one thing, in my personal opinion, I think they lack is that defensive acumen. And that's one problem that right wing backs have, because he's very much going to be deployed in that wing back position. So I don't know if he's used to that at Derby. I don't know what formation you were playing, but it's all well and good having the the desire to get forward and attacking, but how is he defensively? And then secondly, because he does get forward a lot, is the end product there? Because it's all well and good having pace and everything, but as we used to see with Ismail Assar, you can have all the pace in the world, but if you don't run at your man, then there really is no point to having that, because a lot of the time last season, we saw it with Jamal Lewis over on that left-hand side, where we'd get into a position and you'd think, oh, okay, he's going to bomb on here and then we can get it in the box. And then we'd go back to the goalkeeper, or he wouldn't beat his man, or he'd overrun it. So, yeah, defensively, how is he? And secondly, is that end product there? Are we going to see a lot of crosses in the box?
I would say so. Defensively, he was all right, Mike. He wasn't. Don't get me wrong. He's no world class, but he was. Yeah, he was solid enough. To be honest with you, one of the things I find certainly about wing backs, and we've had a couple. I hark back to the season we lost in the playoffs, and we had Fikayo Tomori on loan. He was a good defender, but he was quick. And it wasn't until you sort of scrutinised his game a little bit more that he actually made a fair few defensive mistakes, but his pace absolutely got him out of trouble near enough every single time. So it is hard, really, to kind of think back with everything that's gone on at Derby, to think of too many times he got sort of, really caught out at the back. And if he did, did his pace make up for it? And that sort of, obviously, if he hadn't quite got that pace, would he struggle more defensively? But certainly, when I think of Festy, it's definitely more attacking. He just keeps going. He just keeps going. He gets to the bar line. He can take a man on. His strength is he has got strength. He can hold people off. As I said, his crossing at the time, but obviously I am going back 3-4 years near enough now. His crossing wasn't his fantastic. It wasn't as accurate as you'd like it to be. So he's not quite a winger in that sense, but certainly for attacking down that side, down that left, right side, he can get to the bar line, and more often than not, I would imagine he'd be able to put an half decent ball in. But no issues with taking a man on. Very comfortable at the ball. He can dribble with the ball. He could. We used to play it over the top and he'd run onto it. He is that quick, and he would outmuscle and outpace a lot of defences. So, as I say, it'd be interesting to see him actually in action, because since he's moved on, I've not seen him. So I don't know, obviously, how he's developed over the last couple of years. But I would say if he has developed a little bit, then I think you're definitely getting a good player anyway. You might be getting an even better one.
Yeah, no, you mentioned there about how you used to play to his strengths. So I actually saw a clip on Twitter of his goal against Hull, I think it was, at home, and that was brilliant, and that's what Ryan Andrews does at the moment for us at right wing back. We're seeing he's obviously running on, but he's also not afraid to cut in and take a shot as well. So if Festy's got that in the locker, then that's even brilliant. In terms of, just quickly, you mentioned obviously predominantly played on the right-hand side. What formation was he playing at Derby? Is he wing-back something he's going to be used to, or was it more he was playing a flat-back four, or what was the crack at Derby?
To be honest with you, from what I remember, it was pretty much a flat-back four. And as I say, at times, through injury, we did play him as a right winger. So he's definitely got no worries about getting up and down. Obviously, a wing back needs to be able to get up and down. He'll do that all day long. His stamina is there, his pace is there, his power's there. He can get up and down all day long, mate. There's no two ways about that. Certainly towards the end, we had a absolute injury crisis. So he played a fair bit towards the end of his Derby career as a right winger, in all honesty. But obviously definitely started out as more of a right back type. I don't think he was utilised too much as a right wing back at Derby, but knowing the type of player that you need for that, no issues whatsoever.
Well, that's very good to hear, and it's very positive at the moment. But the last thing I sort of want to touch on, and I appreciate it might be a bit difficult. It's been a few years since he's played, but from what you can remember, it's all well and good hearing about these great things. Was there anything in particular that you remember that you perhaps wasn't impressed with Festy? Any weaknesses?
I mean, to be honest with you, not a great deal on from the footballing sense, but we were watching a Derby team that was 12 months away from relegation, and we were really struggling. And as I say, he's just a name that shone. No Derby fan wanted him to go. We couldn't afford to keep him, basically. And obviously that's where Udinese came in. And to be honest with you, it was under Rooney. He had a bit of a fallout with him because he clearly turned around to him as a young lad, obviously, and said, this club's looked after you. You should see it out. And at the end of the day, footballers, it's a short career, isn't it? He'd obviously had the opportunity. He signed a 5-year deal at Udinese, but yeah, right after that, when that got announced, Rooney actually dropped him and made him train with the under-23s. It wasn't for very long. It wasn't for very long at all because he was trying to prove a point. But ultimately, I think that was the season that we stayed up on the last day of the season, getting a draw at Sheffield Wednesday in the COVID season. So you could argue, does he have a bit of an sort of attitude issue? Certainly never came across too much. And of course, these things, when they're written up, they're probably more blown out of proportion than they are. But at the end of the day, as I said, a young 19, 20-year-old who at the time Derby couldn't offer him anything. So what's he expected to do? He's got to secure his future. There was one or two fans thought, obviously, moving over to Udinese might have not been the greatest of decisions, because I know they've not necessarily had the greatest time in Serie A over the last couple of years. But at the end of the day, so many English and Irish and UK-based youngsters go over there now and make a very good living in a career, and then of course most of them do end up floating back over to England. So I'm sure most Watford fans are looking forward to seeing him. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing him. Hopefully in a few weeks, certainly watching him for you, and hopefully seeing him at Pride Park in a few months' time. As I say, just to see how he has developed. So many youngsters come through, so little actually obviously go on to make it at that grade, do they? So, but he certainly had all the tools as a young lad. There's no two ways about it.
Well, that sounds very positive, and I'm almost sat here pinching myself to think that Watford are capable of picking up a player like this. But you mentioned, obviously, he went to Udinese back then, and I think a lot of Watford fans and probably a lot of Derby fans were thinking at the time, oh, we know what's going on here. Yeah. He's signing for Udinese, but he's coming to Watford. And to be honest, I think that may have been the plan, but whether it just didn't get over the line, maybe the plan was for him to go over there and then come over to us. But they played him and realised how well he's done. As I say, he made 50 appearances for Udinese. But yeah, this has certainly been a long time coming, I think, and it is only a season-long loan, so it depends how much he impresses, and I think it will depend on what this season brings. It will sort of determine if he makes the permanent move over. But that's probably the most positive lowdown podcast we've done. So that's really great to hear. But thank you for joining us today, Jason. As I say, it's always great to speak to you. I wasn't on the preview podcast when we spoke to you guys a few weeks ago, unfortunately, but I did get to watch it over in sunny Spain. So sorry about the result. I genuinely thought you were going to have us when you took the lead. So it's thankfully for us that wasn't the case. But I'm sure we'll speak again in a few months' time whenever the reverse fixture is. But really appreciate your time this morning, Jason.
No problem at all, Mike. It's an absolute pleasure to catch up with you again. But yeah, like last Saturday was all right. No complaints from this end. Off to Bristol City today for at Pride Park. So yeah, looking forward to that one.
Happy days. Well, there, Jason is. So that really is positive, and I'm delighted to hear all that. And it sounds like we got a good player. I think a lot of Watford fans probably knew that there was a certain bit of hype around Festy, and it's good to hear that we've got a player that is also possesses a lot of pace and power. And I think the transfer window as a whole, we put a tweet out at the end of it just to see what you guys thought. So if you're watching this video back, drop it in the comments. Your score out of 10 for our transfer window in the end, which turned out to be all right. Your favourite signing out of those 12 players that come in, and yes, we are counting Vacuum Bio as an incoming. And then worst signing as well, and then just a little summary. Make sure you get all of that in the comments. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, because when you do, there's a little bell next to it. Hit that. You'll be notified every time we go live. We're really trying to drive the YouTube channel this season. We've already seen the subscribers has gone up since the start of the season. We're getting regular content out, so hopefully that's enough for you to drop a like on this and hit subscribe as well. But tomorrow, Watford are in action against Sheffield United at Bramall Lane. 3 p.m. kickoff. Bloody Sky and their new TV deal. That's gonna feel well out of sorts going to Bramall Lane tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I'll be there. Cam will be there, and hopefully we'll be able to get a match day vlog out for you guys as well. But if you're making that trip up to Sheffield, safe travels. But thanks for watching, guys. Keep the faith and come on, you Horns.